Um, Hello. So this is the third episode of Alex Talking to People. I'm very lucky to have the Rye City Council member Josh Nathan here. I met Josh during the Catherine Parker campaign. The first thing I wanted to do, and this was kind of because the original date for this was the 7th of January, but it got delayed. But I still want to ask this question. It was it was on Friday. It was the second anniversary of January 6th. How do you think that's affected our country?
Well, I think it's been I think it's had a tremendous impact on our country. I think it has, and I think that impact is going to be with us for uh, a very, very long time as we as a nation process it. And uh, people start to see and really see the ramifications of what that meant. And as they start to see how some of the very hyper and extreme ideas that have been put out there uh, have have caused just terrible actions. They led to that. They led to that. That truth matters. I mean, in the end of the day, people have to be giving pause and saying, the truth matters. If you tell these lies and you promote them, people act on those lies and people die. Um, I was stunned to see a headline on over the weekend that said something like, it was about the riots in Brazil. 2 years after our insurrection, and um, tying it to the influence of our insurrection. The world looks up to America. We are the pinnacle of democracy and freedom, and when we uh, when we mess that up, it impacts others. Democracy survives on faith in democracy, faith in our Constitution, faith in our community and our values. And so when we challenge those to such an extreme degree, um, uh, people will go off in other directions. And I was stunned to see a headline that said, mass arrests uh, of um, anti-democracy rioters in Brazil. And I thought, how bizarre. When have we had anti-democracy riots? We see pro-democracy riots. And in fact, I Googled the headline because I was looking to see what other coverage there was. And in fact, the search brought up all these pro-democracy riots because it's such an odd thing. We don't have that. Um, Democracy is the best thing we have going. And so for the United States, the leader of, of, uh, of democracy, to, um, for one day 2 years ago, be on the brink of falling apart, to have its very elected officials who swore an oath to our Constitution sit on their hands and do nothing, or encourage the insurrection. It was just stunning to me, and I think it created a divide that I hope many people are regretting. And my friends and colleagues who uh, uh, are traditionally of a different party than myself were distraught over what happened. Uh, I'm certainly glad to hear that they were as distraught as I was. Um, and I'm not surprised because most of us in this country share certain core values, and they are around our democracy. So I think January 6th will resonate for a very, very long time. Uh, and I think it will be referenced and find its way into the history books over time, and become um, a very, very significant event in the lexicon of our history. Uh,
Yeah, I think that was a terrific answer, and I was thinking also just about the protests and the riots in Brazil and the insurrection in Brazil, and it's just it's funny to me that people would be so passionate about electing like a fascist, like people who actually like have studied this in Brazil, who are not necessarily the most left wing people of. We're talking about how Bolsonaro is like even to the right of like Donald Trump
Hmm.
and Le Pen and everybody. And the problem that I see that I think is the impact of January 6th is that it used to be when you lost an election, you would get up on stage and you would congratulate the victor,
Yep.
and democracy would kind of go like that. And that's just how democracy worked. Like you don't always win. And then but I still remember at the candidate who we supported, I still remember the big concession speech Catherine made at the bar. I don't know if you were there. Um,
Yeah.
but uh yeah, so I think it's again, my heart weeps the fact that we're living in a time when a concession speech is not expected, and
Yes.
concession and even violence can not is expected.
So when I was a little kid, and I never forget this. So I had been interested in presidential politics as a little kid. I think it was very present in my at that time in my life. Nixon had resigned, and as a kid, I remember being at summer camp, and summer camp is about camping and outdoors, and there was no television or anything like that around. And they brought in a television set, and they brought all the campers together, and we watched Nixon resign because it was such an important and significant event. And so that was a major part of my childhood. And so for my friends and I, um, presidential politics was very present. We were hyper aware of it, maybe because of being children and shown that event as a major deal and having it explained to us by our parents. And years later, uh, I was following Jimmy Carter's campaign, and I was very excited about Jimmy Carter. And I wrote letters to him during his campaign, as a kid might, and and um, and I got letters back, which was very cool. And he invited all the people who wrote to him during his campaign to come to the inauguration, and my parents took me to Jimmy
Oh, that's
Carter's
awesome.
inauguration, and it was a really terrific experience to see this event. And then 4 years later, I was very excited for Jimmy Carter to be running again, and hoped that he would be reelected. And again, I'm a child during all of this,
How old were you?
well, let's see, when Carter was elected, I was 10, and so when he was running again, I guess I was about 14. So I was a teenager the second time around, and he loses the election. And my father takes me aside, and I'm very disappointed, and maybe this was my guy, right? I went to his first inauguration, and he was my sort of foray into this area of our society, and he was the window into which I learned about American government and American history. I think for many of us, there's something that does that. And my dad uh, was a veteran of the Second World War, and so my household was filled with a very certain uh, uh, ideas and confidence about the importance of American democracy and our place in the world. It gives you a little bit of context. This was the thing that my dad said to me when Carter lost. He said, "Well, you're going to see an amazing thing now." And I love that he said this to me. He said, "We're all going to go lick our wounds, right? Our guy didn't win, the other guy won. And over the next couple of months, the country is going to come together because this new person is our president, and he's going to represent us on the world stage. And we're all going to stand and be represented by Ronald Reagan. And you're going to see that that's the wonderful thing about democracy in America. And he tied it back to uh, Richard Nixon's resignation. And he said, you know, it's such an amazing big thing that we have in this country. It's bigger than any individual. And when Richard Nixon saw that he couldn't lead, he had to resign. And you know, sure, we can parse all the little details, and you know, initially he fought it and all of that, and you know, there's more to it. But in the end of the day, um, democracy was bigger than Richard Nixon. The law was bigger than Richard Nixon. Democracy was bigger than Jimmy Carter, who was at that time my guy. Um, and then Ronald Reagan was our leader. And um, you know, who is someone who just had phenomenal rhetoric on the world stage when it came to standing up for democracy and um, uh, fighting totalitarian government. And that was the era in which I grew up. And then you know, we've had a mix of Democrats and Republicans, and sometimes I've been happy with the election outcomes, and sometimes I haven't. When Al Gore and George W. Bush had to go to the Supreme Court, um, we didn't break out in riots and revolution. The matter was taken to our highest court, and the highest court dealt with it. And some of us may have agreed, and others disagreed with the decision. But in the end of the day, democracy was bigger. Our system of government was bigger. George W. Bush was then our president, and then you know, years later, Barack Obama was our president, and it was the next stage. And we've had this peaceful transition of power in the United States. It's the hallmark of what this country is about. And um, and so to see a president um, who uh, uh, you know, lost a race and then denied the loss, um, uh, well beyond any period of let's wait and see, let's get all the numbers counted. Certainly, let's count all the numbers. But then it was done. And then to promote a lie and to encourage people to go to the Capitol and um, not just exercise their right of free speech, but to attack the Capitol, to interfere with the democratic process, to destroy the one of the greatest symbols of democracy on the planet, to break in and disrupt the very proceeding that goes all the way back to George Washington saying, no, 2 terms is enough, and no, I won't be king. And now you have John Adams, and John Adams losing, and now we have Thomas Jefferson. We never had this before. Elections are sacred. We help other countries with their elections. When you see photos of people voting for the first time, it's the greatest thing. There's a town in North Carolina that rings a bell when an 18-year-old votes because it's the first time, and it's just it's a cool thing. Everybody celebrates and applauds that, oh, we have a first time voter. Um, you see photos in other countries when people get to exercise their right to vote and they're excited about it. And it's a great moment of us all coming together around a shared value that creates stability and hope and opportunity for everyone. And yes, there's many things that we can debate about the right way to do things and what's fair and what's not fair, and how we allocate our resources. But the shared principle of democracy and freedom is so core. And to have it counts on, it depends on the faith that we all bring to it, because the Constitution is it's just a few pages. It's so much more is our belief in it, our agreement, our compact with each other that this is how we're going to have our society. And on January 6th, we saw a group of people attack that. And compared to the 300 and some odd million people in the country, it was a small group, but they attacked at the heart of it. And there'd been the attack in Michigan. It wasn't the first thing, this was organized. And it was fueled by the statements of the outgoing president. And then to have all of those members of Congress sit on their hands and object to certifying a valid election in which there was no fraud, in which there was no false win, was appalling to me. I mean, why they didn't come outside and say, guys, you can protest all you want, you can be upset, but this is the transfer of power now. Why the outgoing president wasn't supporting it. That's what you do. You shake the hands of the new victor and you leave. We watched Barack Obama sit down with Donald Trump in the White House when Donald Trump won and say democracy is fragile and please take care of it. And he was certainly unhappy. The person he backed had lost, and the person who vilified him had won. Who had challenged and questioned his citizenship had won, who'd been, just vicious to him. And yet Barack Obama was there participating in the graceful transfer of power. And that is core to our country. And so, I think January 6th is, it's another day that'll live in infamy. And it's a point in which our nation was tested. And I thought the January 6th hearings were incredibly important, and I'm greatly distressed that we had members, a substantial number of our congressional leadership refuting and ignoring the hearings and objecting to them. It was important for the story to be told. I don't know why they do that. I don't know why they don't just say, look, that was all wrong-headed and we're greater than that. We need to be a country in which we all come together around our core values, and through that we can solve and do great things. We've solved some of the greatest problems in the world. We're the leaders of some of the greatest. We fended off dictatorship. We fended off totalitarian nations. And when we're weak, they become stronger. And when we lead badly, folks in other countries think that that's okay to do. And you see Brazil, which is a much more fragile democracy than ours, and they have riots. They're mimicking us. They're mimicking our worst behavior, and that just saddens me greatly. We have an important job in this world, and we have it, and we earned it, and we need to hold on, because if we don't, look what happens.
And then the saddest thing is it's not only presidential, it's now in state politics now.
Yeah.
And I spend a lot of time in Arizona, and the Kari Lake stuff was scary. And it was just the fact that like somebody can contest an election, can file lawsuits, and not only cause violence, though that's, but I always felt for like the people being lied to.
Yeah.
The people being lied to, and that they're fundraising off of this. These people are making money off of lying to like elderly working class people.
Yeah, the public are victims.
Yeah.
And that's tragic, because they shouldn't be. People who, we count on our elected officials to do in office what we might do if we had the time and information and the technical skills to do it, right? That's part of the trust. We send people to Congress to deal with complicated issues because we are too big and there's too much going on, right? We can't be the purest Greek democracy 5,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago, whenever it was, and all come together in an arena and cast a vote on the issues that affect us, right? It's too big, and so we have representatives, and we trust them, and we also trust them to carry out the process. And so when we look to those officials who we've entrusted with aspects of our our country, just as we trust a doctor when we go to the doctor and we get a checkup, and we trust school teachers to deliver an educational program to our kids, and when we're in college, and in other educational programs, we trust our instructors to instruct us, to give us the very best information and knowledge they can. And so we trust our leaders in political positions in government to carry out the job of governing on our behalf. And we trust them to tell us the truth. We trust them to tell us what's going on right down to the election. And if they lose, we trust them to be gracious and to acknowledge their loss. And certainly, if you have one of these, and we have these mechanisms, they're in place. If an election is super close, there are automatic recounts. We have systems in place to test this. We trust our Board of Elections officials to conduct those, and not under political pressure from anyone trying to sway the event, but everyone agreeing that we just want the true outcome. When I was elected to the city council, it was a close race, and we had absentee ballots that needed to be counted. There were so many of them that they could impact the result of the election. And so we went to the Board of Elections and we watched them open up the affidavits, and not the affidavits, the absentee ballots, well, which have an affidavit. And they counted them in front of us, and nobody was twisting arms or arguing about it. They were looking at them and opening them up and counting them. And my campaign sat there, and my opponent's campaign sat there, and we were all very cordial about it, and very nice. And at one point, I remember there was a signature that looked a little odd, and I said, I have a question about, the signature doesn't seem to line up with the signature in the box. And the other campaign looked at it and they said, oh, I think we know who that is. That's a young person, and they tend to, their signatures evolve over time. And I said, oh, all right, that makes sense. Fine, that's good. They didn't. We weren't fighting with each other. They raised a valid point. I accepted it because it was completely fair. And there were other exchanges like that where, they said to me, oh, this one's hard to read. And I said, yeah. And then they looked at it and they said, oh, they said, well, there's that should count for you. I mean, there was a collegiality of it. There was a belief that what was important was to get it right, whatever the number is. And I walked into that count fully prepared to walk out and shake hands with my opponent and say, well, look, the count came your way or didn't. And, so that's how we function. And so democracy has to be expressed at every level. So I'm going to answer the question you didn't ask, but you were going to, which is, why run? Why serve in local government? And there's many reasons, but certainly January 6th made an impression on me. I think that it is the local expression of our democratic values that's critical. It has to happen throughout the country, in every city, town, and village government, in every county government, in every state government, and in our national government. And the more we're committed to it at every level, the stronger a democracy we are, and the stronger we reinforce those values.
That's a great answer. We are going to get to local politics in a minute, but I wanted to ask like another kind of presidential politics, not about like this nature of democracy, but I was kind of, when I was researching for this interview, I was just looking at who you supported in 2020, and we had different supporters. Like I was a Bernie supporter and you were a Biden supporter. Can you like explain like why you supported our current president in the Democratic primary?
Absolutely. So I was looking at the primaries very closely, and I actually sent a donation to Biden's primary campaign before he announced. I felt that he was the right person for the times we are living in. I felt that as I looked at the array of candidates, that Joe Biden could win, and that he was a moderate voice, and I'm a moderate. Um, uh, and I felt that he had uh, the history of governing that we needed. I felt that there was so much repair work that needed to be done in Washington. Donald Trump disassembled so many aspects of our government on the administration side through countless executive orders, through demoralization of various uh, administrative departments, from the Department of State to Agriculture to Transportation, uh, human to HUD. It was highly, it was a presidency that was disruptive, taking things apart. And I felt that there's an aspect of government that has nothing to do with uh, the politics of electing a president or electing Congress or even appointing judges. It's the machinery that operates our nation. Um, uh, we've a huge territory, we have a huge population, and we play a major role in the world. And all of that has to function. Um, uh, we need um, the National Institutes of Health. We need um, uh, the um, uh, the particular administration that manages atomic energy. We need uh, to be managing our environment, trade, labor, um, uh, Social Security, Medicare, Veterans Administration. Um, we've seen from the storms we've had here in Rye to storms around the country that we need a FEMA that works. And there are people in government who operate these things without regard to politics, but with regard to doing the work that needs to be done uh, to keep our schools and running and our roads paved and our nation safe. We need a military that is thoughtful and strategic and defends our country, and is on the alert. And we had a presidency for 4 years that just sort of disregarded anyone who said, well, there's there's a logic to what we do. There's learning that went into this. And yes, we can discuss policy and we can discuss improving things in better ways, but you just want to smash it all up. I felt that Joe Biden and an administration that he would build would repair our nation. I almost didn't really care about anything beyond that. I did, but I that wasn't the priority. The priority to me was somebody's going to come in and glue everything back together and get things running so that we can then return to our discussion of good policy and what's good for the nation. And I felt that President Biden was the person that the times demanded. And I think who our leader is in the presidency, in Congress, in governorship, in state legislature, in local government, in business is often about having the right person for the time and the demands of the day. And I felt that Joe Biden was that person. I also felt that he could win. There were other talented candidates running who I liked, and I was excited by things I heard. There were other people who I felt had the same values and would do that kind of repair work, but I didn't think they would beat Donald Trump. He was a formidable candidate. He had a very destructive style. And I felt that Joe Biden would just be someone who wouldn't be um, uh, uh, impacted by that. And that proved to be the case. He was able to stand up in the debates and just deflect what Trump did. And we saw, Trump could be uh, you know, quite good at rallying people and taking control of a conversation. And Joe Biden was somebody who just wasn't going to be impacted by that. In part, I think because of his age and experience and his personality, just wasn't bothered. Um, so I just thought he was the guy for the time, and I was very excited about that. And I thought it was very important that we, first of all, that we win. We had to
Yeah.
win, and we was not, to me, the Democrats. We was the country. I felt the country needed this guy. It wasn't about party. It was about, we must have this guy, or a guy or a woman, a person who can rebuild what has been destroyed.
Yeah, and I do agree with you, and like although I do have some uh issues with Biden, I think that he has pleasantly surprised me, especially with the removal of Afghanistan and certain other policies. But yeah, I that's a completely valid reason to support him. Before I let you go, because
Mhm.
Zoom has informed me that we only have 8 minutes left.
Ah,
Uh, so what in terms of so you're a city council member, what are your priorities going into 2023 in terms of local on the local level in Rye?
sure. Um, like I think one of the things that I love about volunteering in Rye is I'm one of many. Everybody in Rye, at one point or another, volunteers and gives to the community, and it is a community that thrives on that. And so the things that are very important to me, and that creates a kind of dialogue that is ongoing within our community. Um, uh, I can't think of a discussion that doesn't involve um, some activity of volunteers in our community, whether it's something going on at the nature center or the parks, or Little League or soccer or the schools or the art center, or the library or city hall, or the board of ed or various clubs and other organization, or Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. These are all um, it's just part of the fabric of this community. And so that dialogue is ongoing. And one of uh, my commitment for 23 is to make sure that that dialogue is happening between the city council and the community at large. Um, our job is to listen, uh, to hear what the concerns of the community are, and to be responsive, and try to address the things that concern the community at large. And sometimes that means um, uh, uh, putting it all together, right? We hear lots of different voices about many different subjects on the city council. We want to make sure that we're synthesizing all of that and being responsive to those concerns. And so my commitment starts always with making sure that we're doing a good job as council, listening and being responsive. Um, I think that there's a very real pressure on our city around flooding, and that remains a top priority for me, is to make sure that we are addressing um, as best we can within the borders of Rye things that impact flooding, uh, and that we work well with our uh, county and state and federal officials to bring the resources we can to continue to address things that drive flooding in our city that come from outside of Rye. I've worked with the boat basin. I say we, really they, have executed a channel dredge, and this fall they'll be executing a basin dredge. Um, and I want to make sure that they have all the support that they need. I liaison with the library. I want to make sure that they have all the support they need. And I think we have a lot of quality of life issues in Rye that have come to the surface in large part because of the pandemic. It's changed the way we work. People are home more, and so daytime quality of life is critical. Noise is a major issue. And we've done things to address the noise from rock chipping and blasting. We've done things to address how development happens in Rye. People are concerned that Rye remain the beautiful community that we all moved into whenever that was that we came here, and people need to be able to improve their homes and do things, but at the same time we need to preserve the wonderful qualities of our small city. And so we have worked on things to make sure that our our neighbors, our concerns about development are addressed, the noise issues are addressed, and we have sustainability issues that are in Rye. Talk about environmental sustainability. It's something that is a global issue, and each community can do things to improve its commitment to sustainability, and we need to make sure we're doing those things. So those are some of the core things. And as part of the dialogue with the community, I just think we need utter transparency with everything we do. What I found in my years living here, almost 23 years and 9 years serving on the Board of Education, was one of the great things is when you explain to the citizens of Rye a particular issue and the options, there's you get good ideas back, you get understanding, and we're able to solve problems. And so the more transparent we are with what we do, the more we explain to people what the issues are that we're facing and the things that we're trying to address, the more support we get for getting that done right, and the more good ideas we get. People come and they say, "You're a good idea." So it's very valuable.
That's a good answer, and I have to stop you there because Zoom is scaring the shit out of me. So yes, thank you so much for doing this interview. It means a lot. I hope. Yeah. Good luck. I know you're up for an election this year, and I hope you win.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
yeah.
Well, I really, I've really enjoyed getting to know you during Catherine Parker's campaign and during Lori Fontana's campaign. I know you worked really hard on both of those, and you get a check in the win box with Lori, and I'm glad she's joined the council. She's going to be great.
Yeah.
And your work is terrific, and I think that you do this podcast is great, interviewing people and this exchange of ideas. It's very rich, and I wish you the best with it, and I look forward to seeing more of them as you continue to do these.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.